Unmute yourself, Jim.
Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Hope you'll come back often and hope you tell your friends about us. We don't have Father Ron with us this evening. He had another commitment, but we do have a video that he's gotten for us. So I'd like to share that with you tonight for our show's prayer.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Ron, for everything that you do for our show. We really do appreciate it, and thank you so very much. Well, we have a great sponsor for our show, Brennan's Model Railroading. Dennis Brennan, thank you so very much for your help.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Sonky Wanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis' spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
Don't know whether many of you remember Frank Ellison or not. I ran across him again yesterday in a book that I got when I was 2 years old. It's published by Lionel Corporation. And throughout that book, it has pictures of Frank's buildings and some of his layout. It's amazing to me how far back Frank goes in our hobby. And it's amazing that Dennis is successful in trying to recreate a lot of the buildings and structures that Frank originally designed, but out of modern materials, not the cardstock that Frank used. Well, now I want to go to Chris Course and Greg Cassidy for the My Build parts of our show. Chris, Greg, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Hey, Greg, you up?
Yep.
Ready. Sorry I didn't get to respond to your email earlier this week. I'll get to it. I promise.
Okay.
All right. Greg, that is. All right. So the next My Build is next week. It is featuring you. So whatever you've got to share with us, we'd love to see. Please email me your photos to railrunner130@hotmail.com. Hope to get that by the 17th. That way it'll give me a couple days to get everything compiled and ready to show everyone on next Wednesday. So if you have not participated in the past, please send a photo of yourself and also a brief description. That way, if for whatever reason you're not there, whether for like I said, for whatever reason, if you're not there, then we can talk a little bit about what you've got going on. And then we'll go ahead and talk about the December My Build, which is a December challenge, which is interiors, the insides of buildings, engine houses, caboose interiors. That show will be December 18th. To participate, email your photos to me. Again, railrunner130@hotmail.com. And please get those to me by December 15th. If you've got them ready now, please go ahead and send them to me. And just mark them for December, and I'll put them in the proper folder. So I'd like to recap, November 20th is My Build featuring you. Email me your photos, railrunner130@hotmail.com. And let's see. Do you have anything to add there, Greg?
Well, I'm looking forward to the December one with interiors because I know a lot of the modelers here like to do interiors, and I have a number that I'll be getting to you sometime in the next couple of weeks. And I also have to correct what I said to Jim last week. He asked if my contest winning was going to be in the My Build coming up next week, and I said no, it's for December, but that's because it had an interior. But I found a way to work it in to the one that's coming up next week. So you'll see it next week, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll see it in December too. Who knows?
All right. Sounds
That's
good.
it, Chris.
Thanks, Greg. All right. And I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
And I hope we see a lot of Christmas stuff for the December one too. That would be nice and something a little unusual.
Yeah.
Greg, I don't know whether you entered the village's contest this year or not, and I didn't realize that the person who was instrumental in both the website and in that whole project to promote the villages and what is it, Village 56, I think it is, and all of those kinds of things. I hadn't realized it until today when I got an email. He just underwent brain surgery for a tumor.
Yeah, and Bill Channel. He's been hosting that newsletter and the contest for 20 years or so, at least for the newsletter. And he did have to go in for surgery, and there was no contest this year. He's been a little overwhelmed. He had problems with the website earlier this year and now the surgery. So there was no contest, but I'm hoping the best for him because a lot of people follow what he puts out about the villaging.
Right, and the emails that he puts out, the newsletter that he does, the website that he has, it's really first class. I mean, he put his heart and soul into that project and into trying to improve the quality of the modeling that the people were doing and the number of people participating. And he started the contest, and he started so many different things that were related to it. And it's unfortunate to hear about his health issues. And I just wish him the best and hope everything turns out well for him.
Right. And I'll make this real short, but probably the rest of us don't know much about what we're talking about. But I just heard a podcast yesterday where one of our model manufacturers was talking about, he went to one of the plastic model industry conventions just this past weekend and really enjoyed it, even though he manufactures laser cut kits. And on the podcast, they were talking about how modelers just enjoy modeling. You like seeing miniatures, whether it's railroad related or model military related or anything. And what we're talking about, the Christmas and Halloween villaging, is just another form of modeling and building miniatures.
Well, wishing the best if you happen to see him, Greg, and thank you so much.
I will.
Well, now I want to turn to Martin to talk about our newsletter. Martin, welcome.
Evening, Jim,
Evening.
or something like it, at least. It's dark out, it might be evening. Don't have really a lot to say about our newsletter, except the next issue is well underway. 35, 45 pages, something like that, plus or minus 35 or 40 pages. Last week, I asked for people to send me portrait-oriented photos suitable for covers. I have a grand total of 2 people who have responded. I am overwhelmed with excitement. It would be nice if we could get maybe bump that number up to, I don't know, 3. So maybe some people could get to work with their camera, try to look through the right side of the camera so the lens is pointed at the subject matter, if you can. I'm not publishing selfies.
Martin, what size?
What
Is there a
size?
specific size?
I'm sorry?
Is there a specific size or maybe a ratio that you're looking for?
Just a good portrait orientation photo, say something in the 3 to 20 megabyte sized photo, depending on your camera settings. 300 DPI, 600 DPI would be better. Something I can manipulate and play with in
You want
Photoshop.
portrait versus landscape?
Preferably portrait. That would make both our lives easier, and I'm very much in favor of making my life easy. Yours is secondary.
What about cell phone photos?
Got to be careful with cell phones. You got to know how to get the settings right in them. Don't ask me how to do that. I barely know how to use a cell phone. Jim can testify to that.
I thought my cell phone was a point and shoot. I didn't know I had to do anything else.
Well, it depends on the settings that are for how big the photos are. I mean, it may look great on the screen of your phone, but when you send it to me and it comes out as 175 kilobytes instead of 2 megabytes, it's probably too small. A lot of my wife's phone is set for thumbnail photos, and she can't figure out how to fix it. And she's a software expert. Mine is set for maximum size, but I had my son take care of it since he knows something about how to use Android phones. I barely know how to plug the thing in to get it charged, so don't ask me how to fix that. I can't help you with your phone. Okay, so.
But if the size is right, then a cell phone photo would work.
Oh, sure.
Okay. And what you need is a big photo from a cell phone.
Yes, a big photo. There you go. Let's lose all the technical stuff.
Yeah.
A big photo that looks like a portrait.
So you got to keep it simple for me.
Okay. Big photo. But gosh, I use 2 syllables. I can't say the word photo in 1 syllable. Unless you're from Philadelphia, I think you can say it then. We were talking, Jim and I were talking about by email about looking for a volunteer to contact manufacturers so we could promote their products in the newsletter. Yeah, we're asking for a volunteer again. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not. I don't really care. I need a volunteer to do that because I don't have that much time in my life, despite being retired. Because I say I'm retired, but I'm a long ways from actually being really retired. But we need somebody who can basically send out emails to a bunch of manufacturers who have been on the show. So let's take the low hanging fruit. Let's contact the guys and gals. Don't leave anybody out who have actually been on the show, trying to hawk their product, promote themselves. We'd like to get them to send us stuff, little newsletters, whatever they got, new products, product announcements. Send their stuff.
I'll probably be doing.
Excuse me?
I'll probably be doing that to get people on the show and get advertising. So pencil me in for now.
Oh, we've hooked a sucker. Okay, you're on, Tom. Yeah, I recognize the voice well enough to know who I've got on the line. So, but yeah, we like to look back about maybe 2 years in time. Jim's got the list of everybody that's been on. just like send out a blanket email and say, hey,
I'm gonna-
guys,
I'm going to call him personally.
you clearly have way too much time in your life.
Well,
But I
don't.
thank you. I thank you. And I thank you. Jim thanks you and everybody else thanks you. We'll send you, we'll print you a certificate suitable for framing and mail it to you.
How about a gift certificate at an Irish pub?
How about a free bus ticket to Bayonne?
Yeah, that would work too, eh?
Yeah. I didn't say it's only going to be a one-way ticket, so you're on your own. Okay. Back to you, Jim. We've had enough hilarity.
What else do you need for the newsletter for December? And I'll tell you who you can get front cover shots from.
Okay.
Call Dennis Brennan. Tell him you need 12 shots for the cover.
Oh, I'm sure Dennis probably can do that.
Because if nobody else is going to send them in, then it's ridiculous that we keep begging people to volunteer and nobody does it.
Well,
but it would be great if we can get 12 different people.
Oh, yeah.
For a cover once a year. I mean, that's not a lot of volunteer effort, and that would be great. And we get to see a lot of different model railroads, and we get to see a lot of different people's projects that they may have been working on for no telling how many years. And that would be wonderful. But if we can't get anybody to volunteer for whatever reason,
it's Jim in a Speedo if we can't get anybody to volunteer.
Yeah. So, because with all of the effort Martin is putting into this newsletter and wanting to make it a first-class operation and trying to get people to help so that we do get manufacturers to share their new products and so forth, we're not asking them for money. It doesn't cost. This is free advertising for them. And these may be manufacturers that a lot of people have never heard of before. Because if you're not living close to them, they probably don't go to shows that you would be familiar with. And they probably don't go to the national shows because they can't afford it. So this is an opportunity for these small, medium-sized manufacturers to pick up some free advertising and to be able to interact with a lot of modelers. All they got to do is send Martin some information. That's all it takes. And we've got the newsletter to do it.
There you go. Okay.
So, if the manufacturers are saying, hey, great idea, Jim, but we're too busy, we don't have time to do that, then, that's all we can say. Then you're limiting the growth of your company because this is free advertising for you. We're not asking for any money from you or anything or commitments from you. You don't have to be on the show. You don't have to do anything. Send some information to Martin so that he can share it and try to update the people that read the newsletter about what's happening in our hobby. That's what it's all about for us. Martin, thanks so much for everything that you're doing. I can't thank you enough.
Okay, well, I'm going to go have a nice lay down now, and you can go on with the show.
Good luck with the dentist tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right. So now I want to turn to Bob Davidson to talk about our scholarship summit. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, sir.
I'll try to be brief. I realize that there are probably some folks who aren't here every week to hear us talking about it. So just a quick recap, it's almost 3 years ago now. We came up with the idea, Phil and Jim came up with the idea of having a scholarship for young modelers to help them in their educational pursuits. And since that time, we have incorporated. We're a registered nonprofit with the IRS. And in 2 years of operation, we've granted $7,000 in scholarship money to 4 very talented modelers. One was a repeat, so really 3. But we've given out 4 scholarships in just 2 years. And I'm very happy to say that this year we are on track. We will most certainly be matching, at least giving 3 additional $2,000 scholarships. We hope that we'll be able to increase that number, and we can do that with your help. So please, we try to make our determination of how many scholarships we can offer by the end of the calendar year. So there's about 6 weeks left, and if you haven't made a donation yet, it's very simple to do. You just go to newtracksmodeling.com and click on the scholarship tab, and then there is a tab there to make a donation to the scholarship. And there's two ways to do that. You can do it through the Zephy portal, which we've selected. Zephy is an online support service for nonprofits. They do not charge us a penny to process your payment to us, your donation to us. So 100% of whatever gift you give through Zephy will come to the scholarship. You can also, there's an address there, you can also send a check to our treasurer. And that's another way that we can help you facilitate your donation to the scholarship. We also want to thank, we have corporate sponsors. And this year we were very pleasantly, not surprised, but welcomed. The Amherst Railway Society became a platinum sponsor this year at a $1,000 level. And the Great Scale Model Train Show, which was a brass sponsor last year, has upgraded to a silver sponsor, which is at the $500 level. And then you can see we have 5 wonderful companies that are all brass sponsors. So just amongst these folks, we have more than one scholarship sponsored. And please support these people because they're supporting our hobby through supporting the scholarship. You know, this scholarship is set up because we're losing, you know, unfortunately, we're aging out. You know, I ride motorcycles too, and the Harley population is also aging out. But we have a way to continue our hobby by encouraging young modelers to stay with this wonderful hobby that we love so much. So if you have a company that's out there, if you can make a financial contribution, please do. If you want to discuss it with Jim or myself, I will put the our email addresses into the chat, or you just could write to email us at ntmms@newtracksmodeling.com. This year, we also started a new program for manufacturers specifically who are helping us get the word out. So these are our kit advertising partners. And you can see here we already have 6. And oh, we have a light that just went off. We now have 7. Thanks to Bob Geldmacher and the folks at Carroll Creek Design Group. They have just today agreed to put our flyers into their products when they ship out. So we now have 7 companies that are helping us spread the word across the country and around the world about this scholarship. So if your company is interested, there's no financial obligation with this. One of the things we've discovered is it's as important for us to get the word out about this scholarship to these young people and to people who may know these young people as it is for us to raise the funding for these scholarships. So please, if you have a company or if you know of a manufacturer, please tell them to get in touch with us, and we will do whatever we can. We prepare the flyers for you. We'll send you the artwork. So there's really no cost to you at all. And this is just a great way to get the word out about the scholarship. Remember, we are the only group, independent, nonprofit group that's offering scholarships to railroad and other modelers right now across the country. Jim always mentions the folks at Walthers that do their scholarship. That's a corporate thing. Greg, I know, is involved through his railroad club, but that's only for modelers in Maryland. So this is the only nationwide program for modelers. We had modelers from Maryland that have received scholarship, from the West Coast that have received scholarship, from South Carolina that have received scholarships. So please think about it over the next 6 weeks. If you can, make a donation. If you have a company, please join us in spreading the word about this program. So Look at that. I tell you, Phil, he's a rocket when it comes to updating these things. So, and again, support these people because they're supporting us. And we're a family, and we need to make sure that our family stays healthy. One other thing that I just wanted to mention briefly, last week it generated some interest. If you do make a donation through Zephy, or if you want to send a check in honor of or in memory of anyone, please note that there is a place to put that on the Zephy platform, or you can include a note if you send a check in to Tom, our treasurer. And we will be developing a way on the website to be able to list those gifts that are made in either honor of or memory of someone. So please consider, as the year comes to a close, making another gift. If you've given before, please think about giving again. If you haven't, we've got to keep this hobby going, and the only way to keep it going is through encouraging young modelers to stay with us. So that's all I got, Jim.
Yeah, I got a question.
Sure.
Will a Visa card work on donations?
Absolutely. You can use
Okay.
your credit card over the Zephy platform, or you can do, if people are more comfortable with having it done through a direct transfer from your checking account, they can do an ACH transfer as well at Zephy.
Thank you.
And it's very secure. And remember, it's all tax deductible. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it so much, all the hard work that you put into this. Well, now let's start the show. And the first segment that we're going to be doing is about HO scale modeling. And we have a sponsor for this, Mainline Hobby Supply.
Mainline Hobby Supply is your one-stop store for model trains in G, O, S, HO, N and Z scales, including locomotives, rolling stock, track, train sets, and more to help build your model railroad. We are the largest model railroad shop in the area, and we carry a wide range of model railroad supplies across scales. Our friendly staff is always available to help with your modeling needs and to special order anything you may require. Mainline Hobby Supply is in southern Pennsylvania, halfway between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We are only an hour away from Baltimore, and we are easy to get to from the 70, 81, 83, and 270 freeways. Plan to stop by on your next trip through Pennsylvania. Mainline Hobby Supply also has an online store that can cater to your modeling needs wherever you are located. With our large inventory, fixed shipping costs, friendly and knowledgeable service, and prompt shipping, consider Mainline Hobby Supply for your next online order. Use the QR code to access our online store.
Well, normally Ed O'Rourke is the person who hosts this segment for us, but he's not available this week. And I asked a friend of mine, Jack Deidel, who just finished his convention for the Mideastern region. And he's been kind enough to fill in for Ed. And Jack, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I hear your convention was a huge success. Congratulations. And frankly, New Tracks Modeling is proud to be a sponsor of your convention. So welcome and thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Jim. Let me see if I can get squared away here. I'm always happy to be a pinch hitter. And let's see. All right.
Down on the bottom right by the slide bar. Go all the way to the bottom right by the slide bar. Next to the left of the slide bar. The thing that looks like a screen. Click right there.
There we go. Perfect. Excellent. Well, Jim, I thought I'd do something a little bit different today, but obviously still in keeping with the HO theme segment. I know you mentioned AP with somebody a little while ago. I'm happy to report that I just finished my 7th AP certificate. But I thought that when I grow up, I'd like to be like Jim Kello and earn all 11. So I'm starting certificate number 8. I actually started it a few months ago, and a convention sort of got in the way, and in addition to a few other things. But I've decided that I'm going to go for the prototype modeling. And even if you're not a member of the NMRA or interested in the AP program, hopefully you'll find something of interest here for your own modeling. The the Master Builder prototype models has a number of requirements. As you see here, the 6 models, 2 of the 6 must be scratch built, and it must be 4 different types: rolling stock, a railroad structure, excuse me, a caboose or passenger car, and motive power. And there are some other elements that are part of the prototype scene, such as terrain, background, lighting, conformity, etc. But as the heading of the slide says, it's for another time. We don't have the minutes in this 15-minute segment to get into all of what's required. What prototype scene? Well, I grew up in Ipswich, Massachusetts, hence the name of my little company, Ipswich Hobbies. And I could easily, say easily, but I could reasonably do a prototype scene with all the personal knowledge and exhibits, photographs, etc., that I have available for Ipswich. My personal modeling and HO scale focuses on the Boston engine terminal, the BET North Station area. But that is simply not too practical because most of the structures are overwhelmingly large and just wouldn't work for an AP certificate. However, a friend of mine, Brian Bollinger, has several kits that he has produced of one general scene in Kentucky, New Hampshire. He has, you see the list right here. He's got 5 kits that he's produced, and I have each of those kits. And they're all in HO, and except for the automobile covered bridge, the rest of them still exist. So I can go out and photograph them and where necessary measure. The kit 1013, the automobile covered bridge, that was long gone. I think it was in the 1930s. New Hampshire took that down. The first kit that I have finished, you just need to detail it, is the station itself. This is the Bollinger product 1026. Makes a nice model. The building still exists. It's restored as a local museum. I got to take a look at it from inside from the basement to the attic. I know more about the that building that I care to know, but that's the anchor of the scene that I have in mind. I have this kit not yet built, but you can see on the photograph on the right, it's the photograph that I took a couple of years ago. You can see in the background, just to the left of the Reddy's Market, you see the bridge, the railroad covered bridge, and then the street that's in front of the market that turns to the left. That's where the automobile covered bridge used to be. And I can't imagine how many accidents there must have been when they had 2 covered bridges almost merging at the far end. I think when they had horse and buggy carriages, it worked out okay. But when you had automobiles and steam locomotives coming through different bridges at the same time, that must have been pretty awkward. On the left is just a box cover. So I need to make a model of that, which I shall do. The box cover on the lower left gives you a view of what that automobile covered bridge used to look like.
Mm-hmm.
This is the covered bridge kit that I finished, and there are 1,550 parts in that bridge. It took me a while. It wasn't all that complex. It was just lots of repetition, lots of cutting of strip wood. But it's a dramatic scene, and you can see from the box cover, when I get into placing structures, I need to have a nice river scene and create the supports of the bridge and the embankments and so forth along the river. This is a section house. I know Craig mentioned a little while ago about some interiors. I have a photo at the bottom right here where I tricked out the section house, framed it out, and just loaded it up with tools and a little hand cart that's in there. But that's one of the structures that Bollinger put out. So I think between the depot, cover bridge, the section house, so far I get 3 structures for that scene, all in kits. Now, the freight house, I have to build that, scratch build that. There's no kit of that. Who knows? Maybe Ipswich Hobbies will come out with a kit of that sometime. But that is a potential and pretty easy scratch build. It's basically a rectangle with 2 truck side doors and matching doors on the other side for a siding for unloading the freight car. And I can, between the Reddy's Market that you saw earlier and the depot itself, there are 2 large residences. So I'd have to somehow kit bash or scratch build those 2 structures. And then there's all sorts of details that would go into the scene, such as telltales for double tracks on each end of the bridge. The various signs, I can probably find from one of these scene board maps a location of a crossing shanty or so, and there's always some homes that I can build in the background. So there's plenty of work ahead of me on doing some scratch building once I finish the kits, and then place these kits where they belong, and probably do some scratch building of the ties for the and put some rails down. But that is basically a quick HO segment, Jim, of the next AP certificate that I have in mind.
Anybody have any questions for Jack about this? I think it's wonderful, Jack. I really do. What's your NMR number, Jack?
I don't have it yet. I just submitted the SOQ with the 7 certificates in, so maybe I'll have a number by the end of the year. I'm not sure how long the process takes.
Congratulations. I think that's wonderful. My gosh, yeah. I know you've been working on it for a while.
Well,
I have a question.
Greg.
Jack, this is Greg. Are you going to build this as a separate diorama standalone, or are you incorporating this into your layout?
Separate diorama. I don't have enough room on my own layout for this. And I really modeled Boston itself.
Okay.
I don't really get up into the mountains of New Hampshire.
Have you figured the type of dimensions that you'll need yet?
I have about 15 feet by 24 inches that I could almost fill with the scene.
Okay.
But I can imagine once I fill that scene up and score the AP in that, hopefully, I'll probably just cut it up and repurpose the structures.
Yeah.
And I will.
You might like it enough.
I will do a shout out. I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
You might like it enough when you're done with it to keep it together and take it to shows or something.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I will take this opportunity to do a little shout out to Martin, because my 7th certificate was AP cars, and I'm an HO scale modeler, but I picked up on all of Martin's articles and new tracks, videos, and all of his teachings, including a hands-on at a convention probably 10 years ago. Bottom line is I did 4 scratch build O-scale cars for my AP car certificate. So maybe Martin will buy those. What do you think, Martin?
Right.
So anyway, that was I found a lot of help from what Martin had written and presented on the various new tracks. So thank you for that.
Glad to have been of assistance.
Because I might send one to Martin. He'll cannibalize it for the parts.
Yeah. Well, once you get this a little bit further along, Jack, I hope you'll bring it back and take some photos of it and show it on one of the My Build segments we have, because it sounds fantastic.
Okay. All right. It sounds good.
Thanks so much for doing this, and congratulations on your convention.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Well, now let's go to in-scale modeling, and we have another sponsor for that, National Capital Trains.
National Capital Trains is the largest supplier of N-scale modeling products in the state of Virginia. We have been in business since 1989. We carry a full line of modeling products, specializing in N and HON3 scales. We carry a large selection of competitively priced high-quality N-scale products from Atlas, Bachmann, Digitrax, Intermountain, Cato, Microtrains, NCE, Pico, Rapido, Soundtrax, as well as Brass. For foreign railroad train aficionados, we offer a wide selection of Japanese and European prototype trains. We are located 20 miles from Washington, D.C. in Springfield, Virginia. We are a short 7-minute drive off Interstate 95. Stop in and see us for the best in N-scale. We also have online ordering on our website, including great prices and expert advice. Call us for your N-scale modeling needs and advice. Use the QR code to visit our website. We look forward to serving you.
And our host for this segment is Bill Stimson. Bill, welcome.
Welcome. Hi, Jim.
Hey, how are you?
Here we go. So this month I'm going to show building a T-track module, which is, and here's a picture of as far as I've gotten with it. You start out with building the module. I went to Home Depot and I bought a piece of plywood, a piece of pine, this whitewood, 6 feet long, some T-nuts, and some bolts for less than 20 bucks. And you take the plywood and you cut it into a 12 1/8, which is a one, what they call a one module. And I chose 11 5/8 inches because I had a piece of 2-inch foam I wanted to use with this, and that was the size that worked. And so I cut 2 pieces of the whitewood and 12 1/8 for the front and the back, and 2 10 1/8 for this 2 sides, as you'll see. I you drill a hole in each one of the short pieces, and you insert T-nuts in that. And then I put the top on. The T-nuts and the bolts are 4 legs that can be adjusted so that you can match the height of other modules if you use this with them. This thing is attached with carpenter's glue, clamped, and wood screws. I don't know if you can see the wood screws here. And then I use a spacer here and added the 1x3 shorter pieces in there. And then you add the track, and it was a revelation to me to work in millimeters because it's easier, because I don't have a ruler that does 1.3 inches. The first track is 38 millimeters from the front, and then the second track, the tracks are on 33 millimeter centers. And so I set the foam piece back another track center width, and all of this is down with carpenter's glue. And then I'm building a retention wall. And I had used 2 boxes of woodland scenic stone retaining walls and learned from various CC Crow articles in several magazines that the best way to cut this, because it's too tall for that structure, is you put a little bit of water on where you want it cut, and you cut it with a hobby knife, and it cuts the plaster off. Oops. Well, and then I took all of those pieces that cut and attached them to a piece of task board with some glue, and then I wet the joints here and filled them with plaster, as you can see over on the right, picture on the right. If you put the water down, it helps the new plaster adhere to the old plaster. And then I painted the wall using Deco Art acrylics, cobblestone, iced coffee, zinc, and slate gray. The cobblestone is this gray on the top, which is essentially concrete, and kind of is in the fill. I painted the whole thing that way first, and then used a sponge to dab on the iced coffee, the zinc, and the slate gray on the stones themselves. And once again, some more carpenter's glue, and attached it to the front of the foam. And then I dug into my box of old buildings that I have that has more buildings than I care to admit, and found some that will fit on here and make a nice little town scene. And so I needed some roads. So I cut some styrene strip to outline the roads after measuring where those buildings were, and poured in some more casting plaster. And then used the remaining stuff, covering the track with some tape so that I didn't get the plaster all over the unit track. And then I leveled the road with a drywall knife and painted it with aged concrete. And I attached all my DPM buildings to a sidewalk and washed the street with alcohol and India ink. And I didn't like the way that worked out, so I added some other shades of mid-brown and oil earth and light gray to it to hopefully tone down some of the darkness of the India alcohol ink. Then I needed a fence to keep people from falling off that plateau onto the tracks, so I found I had a Bar Mills Insta fence, and using a sponge and some Deco Art whitewash, I dabbed that onto the fence in kind of a random pattern to make it look like it's been there a while. And I attached some signs. Didn't take a picture of the signs because you can't see them, but I put them there anyway. So the next task was to ballast the track. And I spread some Elmer's glue around the edges and sprinkled on fine gray ballast. And then I decided while that was drying, I would attach the fence with some more Elmer's glue to the plaster, and attached it to some 1, 2, 3 blocks to make sure it stayed straight up and down. And I went back to the foreground, and some of the extra plaster is laid on here, and painted that with some old Sterling mud and agrath earth that I had from my miniature painting. These technical paints from Citadel, if you've never used them, if you let them sit for a while, they will crack and make cracks and just kind of make it look like dirt that has dried after being wet, and you get the cracks in them. And I covered that with Mississippi mud and khaki tan, and added some fine brown particles. Then it was time to paint the rails. So I painted the rails with burnt umber, making them look like they would. You can see in the back track has been painted, the front one hasn't yet, making them look a little more old. And then I had to use a knife to scrape off the tops of the rails, because otherwise the Locomotives will not get any power if you run them. And I added some foliage to the front and you just dotted on some white glue. And these tufts have adhesive on the bottom of them, but I didn't want to rely on that. So I used the white glue to help their adhesive make them stick to this. You can see in this bottom right picture how the paint has cracked there. Makes for an interesting effect. And in the one corner, I decided to try and make like a pond or a puddle. So I painted on some gloss varnish, and you can see the before on the left and the after on the right. It makes it look at least a little wet. And then I decided I needed a backdrop for this, so I cut a piece of cardstock to the right size and painted it with sky blue and dead white and various other colors, all kind of painted together so they purely randomly get some color on the back there. And I have a few things yet to do to this thing. I need to add some figures and cars and details to populate the city in the foreground. And I may add some lights to the building or some street lights. So that's it. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Bill?
Yeah, Bill, does the power just come from connecting them to other tracks?
Yeah, and they do suggest every so many that you build that you include a power terminal. You know, they have a small piece of Unitrack that has a power terminal in it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a way to, they want the front track blue to white and then the back track white to blue from rails as you go.
Okay.
So that the front track is powered in one direction and the back track is powered in the other direction.
Okay, but you don't have to do it with each segment.
You don't have to do it with each section because unless you put an insulating rail joiner in there, because otherwise the way these things connect to one another is by the rails. Let me see. Where's one of the pictures with just oops. No, with just a track on it. I don't know if you can see. They actually stick over the edge, and you connect one model to the other just by track. That's the only way these modules are connected.
All right, thanks.
Bill, thank you so much. Really, really impressive work.
Thanks, Jim.
Looks great. See you next time. Thank you. Well, I was going to have John Anfinson, who lives in Deadwood, South Dakota, on the show tonight. Unfortunately, John had a conflict and couldn't be here. John has a model railroad club out there that he's involved with, that he's trying to keep going and get new members for and so forth. And I thought it was really an interesting kind of project that he's involved with in a part of the world that I've never even traveled to. So I invited him to be on the show. I'm sorry he couldn't make it tonight, but I will get him rescheduled later on as soon as his schedule allows it. So now to talk to Matt Woods. Matt is building his dream layout one diorama at a time. Matt, I think it's a wonderful idea. It fits right in with what I hear a lot of modelers say that they're able to do, given where they are in their life right now. And so I'm anxious to see your dioramas.
Well, thanks, Jim, for having me. And, this is my first time on New Tracks. So I've selected a number of photos of my work, and hopefully that will kind of convey the type of modeling I do, some of the subject matter, and just the style of modeling that I've kind of adopted. But, I guess I would like to make maybe one small correction. I'm not necessarily building these various dioramas with the intent of putting them or incorporating them into a larger layout per se, but I see them as individual studies or opportunities to kind of execute different modeling skills and they're each kind of an individual canvas that if I were confined to just a layout, I would be somewhat limited in what I could pursue. So having these different dioramas and modules of different sizes gives me many different canvases and just opportunities to kind of perfect and fine tune my modeling skills and pursue things that maybe I wouldn't be able to do if I were confined to a layout. Okay, so hopefully you can see the pictures here.
Yes, showing good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I primarily model in Owen 30, and I particularly kind of like the steam era, early 1900s up through probably Depression era, and I'm definitely a freelance type modeler. So I am constantly looking for new subject matter, and I like rural scenes, agricultural type scenes, and also kind of nautical scenes. So I do a lot of different things that kind of reflect those interests. This particular photo was taken from a Owen 30 micro layout that I was working on this past spring and into the summer. It's 2 by 4 feet, and it uses Chris Bond's full circle models track system, which is essentially laser cut wooden ties, and you spike the rails to the ties, and it allows you to use very small radius curves because the tie strips can be manipulated into pretty tight radius curves. So this is the layout is called Hemlock Hill, and it kind of reflects an area nearby where I live. And I modeled in spring. Typically I model in fall, but this time I decided to try something a little bit different. So this is just a sampling from that new layout that I was doing. This is a photo of a 2 by 6 module. I did this work during the early days of the pandemic, and this is Owen 30, and it's meant to represent a logging town or a lumber town in northern Michigan. And there aren't moose in the lower peninsula of lower Michigan, but I thought it looked kind of neat to have a moose in there. So this is a scene from that module. This is a scene, it's supposed to represent a whistle stop station on the Ohio River in Western. This is Shepherd's Ridge, is an actual location on the Ohio River in Western. And I scratch built this little passenger shelter by board. And I used pretty extensive use of the JTT fall corn. So this is about probably a 1 by 2 diorama with a pumpkin patch in the foreground and kind of my typical fall scenery. This is actually a HON3 water scene, kind of a harbor scene or a dock scene. And there's probably 5 or 6 different structures on the scene, but I'm very interested in northern Michigan, the area around Traverse City and the Leelanau Peninsula and the Old Mission Peninsula. And this is somewhat of a fictional or proto-freelanced scene, kind of reflecting a fishing town on Lake Michigan. This particular photo. As the title says, I very much consider model railroading an art form. So it's an opportunity to express artistry and creativity. And this is actually, I think, one of my best photos I've ever taken of anything I modeled. But this is a small freight on kind of a fictional logging railroad. I have a couple of freelance lines that I use as the subject matter for my modules and dioramas. And this particular line is called the Old Mission in Leelanau. So if you're familiar with northern Michigan, upper northwestern corner of Michigan, those names may ring a bell. But this is a beaver pond with a lodge and dam and a scratch-built trestle and photographic background. So I think it's kind of a neat scene.
I do too.
This is a series of dioramas that I did. I actually did an article for the 0130 annual, I think 2 years ago. And it's the fictional line is called the Killbuck Valley Railroad. And this is a depot scene. And I did I think 8 to 10 dioramas with similar scenic treatments. And it was to give the impression of a contiguous actual railroad. And so I took the photographs, and if you did not know better, you would think that it was part of an actual layout. This was actually taken outdoors. The diorama was taken outside, and I think it's a pretty dramatic photo. This is another water scene. This was supposed to represent my Old Mission in Leelanau main line on the Old Mission Peninsula along Lake Michigan. And it's a kind of a beach scene with a whistle stop station right along the shore. So the track is hand laid, and it's just a kind of a beach scene with the forest coming right up to the water, and the grasses that you would find in a dune or beach type area. And there was I did an article in the Gazette, the Narrow Gauge Gazette, that talked about this particular scene. This is about 1 by 24 inches, something like that. 1 foot by 2 feet. I particularly like water scenes, and this is a kind of an old fish shack. I actually refurbished a model that I did a very long time ago. It was supposed to be a mine, and I completely redid it. I repainted it and put battens on the side and improved the building significantly and put it into a harbor or a water scene. So this is actually one of my favorite structures. This is O scale. This is my little porter. Appears in a lot of my different photos. I only have one of them, but this is a Bachmann Porter 0130 with a Banta replacement cab put on it. And I thought that figure sitting on the windowsill kind of looked neat. This was a 2x4 module that was kind of just a typical northern Michigan type scene. The pulpwood rack is a product that Portland Locomotive Works produced a few years ago. So I thought it was kind of a neat scene. A lot of those grasses are made out of China bristle brushes and various other fibers that come from kind of non-conventional sources. Some of it's static grass, but a lot of it is other types of fibers. This is a kind of a roadside fruit stand that I did fairly recently. It vaguely resembles Finster's farm market that Bar Mills produce, but I kind of did my own scratch built version of it. And the apple barrels are those are Ham River resin apple barrels. So it kind of makes for a neat fall scene. There's actually an abandoned siding behind the building. And then the tree line kind of creates a natural backdrop. So you can see tire ruts and just some empty apple crates and so forth. This is actually an HO scene here. This was a diorama that I did for my clinic that I put on at the National Narrow Gauge Convention. And Sam Swanson had suggested that I do something in HO. So I wanted to have kind of a representative model of an HO barn. The clinic was called the Rural Scene, and it included information on building barns and plowed fields and fence rows and tree lines. So this particular scene has a scratch built barn, and then some different rolling hills and tree lines, and just a variety of scenic techniques to kind of achieve a neat fall scene. This is one of my favorite scenes. This is kind of a typical rural country road. I'm actually in the process of completely redoing this scene. So I've removed a lot of the vegetation and the round hay bales, and kind of backdated it to an earlier era. I scratch built a new barn and am trying to improve the scene drastically. So I probably will be posting some pictures on the Owen 30 L. Judy's Facebook group, kind of showing the progress I'm making on this particular scene. This is another example of modeling kind of the ordinary things that you see in rural areas. And I like barns. I like replicating rural scenes. So this was a scratch built barn with a kind of an old falling down wooden silo. There's actually a plowed field to the right of the silo, but I used grass tufts extensively for the ground cover. And, if you look at a lot of my work, a lot of the coloration is very similar. And I guess that you would kind of call that my signature style. That's the last slide that I have, but I'm always trying to improve my creations, always looking for new subject matter. I was out driving around today, looking at some Amish farms, trying to kind of get more information on what early 1900s farms would look like. And I like being out in the fall, just kind of taking in the scenery and looking at. I live in an area that's very heavily Amish, so it's almost like taking a step back into the early 1900s and being able to kind of see what it would have been like during that time period. But I think I'm going to be on the New Tracks presentation a few more times here, and I plan on getting into some of my techniques for building these types of structures, and some of my scenery techniques and some of the materials and products that I'm using for these particular scenes. But if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Matt, this is Bob Geldmacher. I really like the subtle transition in your trees from let's say the fall colors.
Yes.
And a lot of times I've seen in fall foliage where people are using individual colors of, let's say, ground foam, and the transition just isn't there. Are you doing anything special to get that transition, let's say from a yellow to a red or a yellow to an orange?
Well, I use the super trees a lot, and
Yep.
I have some old Bachman kind of an orangish ground foam that had kind of a variegated tone to it, but also some yellow. And in the course of doing these various scenes, I might lightly flock some of the super tree with some of the orange, and then others will be some of the yellow, maybe even some green. And I think the mistake that maybe some people make is too heavily flocking, like the super tree material. So I try to, using hairspray to attach it, try to go fairly light on the coverage. And I think having a little sparser coverage. And also I paint the super tree material a dark brown, actually Rust-Oleum camouflage, dark earth. And having that dark coloration on the super tree gives you more of a shadow effect, I think. And if you don't paint the super trees, I don't think they look as good. So, a dark gray or even a dark brown, I think creates more definition and shadowing of the trees.
No, I thought they looked really nice. Nice job.
Thanks.
I hope everybody really. Go ahead.
This is an excellent demonstration of what Martin Welberg talked about at the narrow gauge convention, that people tend to use too broad a span of colors. And though you use multiple colors, they should be similar or close to each other, and it gives you that kind of transition and blend, and the colors look like they belong together. And too often when people do fall, they have a lot of orange, then a lot of red, then a lot of yellow, and it looks it doesn't look natural. But using a palette of similar colors gives you a much more natural effect.
I agree. I use a lot of Martin Welberg's materials. The thicket, his high dark brown thicket, has kind of an undergrowth. And then, a lot of Vallejo or AK Interactive tufts in conjunction with that, and then the super tree material. But yeah, keeping a kind of a narrow color palette, I think, does look more realistic.
Matt, this is Steve Sherrill. I'd like to know, how do you store these dioramas?
Well, it's a challenge. A lot of them are in plastic containers, like large plastic containers to keep the dust off them. But it's a constant challenge coming up with enough space. And I do have an actual layout that's about 14 by 14 HO layout that's kind of in process. I mean, most of the scenery is done, but it doesn't, it's not completed. But I have various size modules, 2x6, 2x4, and keeping the dust off them and finding enough space is a definite challenge.
Yeah. Well, you've done a really nice job on your work is really fantastic. I want to compliment.
Thank you very much.
Very nice.
Well, as Matt said, he's going to be back several more times on the show. This is kind of to give you an introduction of what I consider to be something that is really fantastic modeling. And not only that, but it's the kind of modeling that I hear a lot of people talk about, that they have the space for, that they can do. Maybe not as many modules as Matt has shown us tonight, but they can do a small module and take an awful lot of time doing it. We're trying to commit to a model railroad right now. They just don't have the space for. So for me, I think the modules are something that is really important to our hobby right now. And I think Matt does a beautiful job. So Matt, thanks so much for being here this evening. Look forward to your next appearance.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, now I want to turn to Martin Brechbiel, MMR, for his Scratch Builders Corner. Martin, welcome.
There I am. Okay. So, why is this always over here? Okay. There it goes. Okay. Is this working? I guess it is. Okay. So, let's do something familiar tonight. Another maintenance away car. Fancy that I would actually do such a thing. And while I was scanning in a decade or two of the Gazette, I captured a plan or three along the way. And I thought, well, that's an interesting little car. And it is an ON30, which I'll promptly ignore and go straight to translate that to standard gauge, because I don't really care what gauge or scale the photo's in or the plans are in. I'll just change it into whatever I want it to be, because when I want one, I'll just build one. And you should be equally fearless about that. And we'll start up by building three sections of the one wall. So we're starting with this side right here. And we've got some 3x4s and some other strip wood and a bunch of stained coffee stirrers, the good old fashioned coffee stirrers, because I found a bundle of those wrapped up in a rubber band on the shelf on my #1 bench. And I thought, gosh, I should do something with these to make them go away someday soon. And this project said, oh, use me here. So there we have two parts of the wall. There's the door. And these are actually edge glued together as a unit, and then these other parts are glued on top of it. Little carpenter's glue, some weights, and some patience or impatience in my case. Now that we have some idea how big a car this is, because I've built that one section of the wall, got to have enough car and a little bit more for the open area. So this is the basic flat car that I generally build, give or take a few feet. This is actually pretty short. This is, I think, is only about 32 scale feet. And it's all board by board. This is 3x stock. I don't remember what width it is, 3x8, 3x7, but there is I would put my cursor on just the one board that was the other size, just to make it come out even. But these are just glued down to this framework. Those are my resin cast bolsters, drilled and tapped for 440. This is fun to put together. Train line runs through it. That's just, I can't see the other side of it because of this toolbar. It's just a piece of 28 or 31 thousandths brass or phosphor bronze wire, just threaded through. When it's being glued together, it comes together fairly reasonably. I wish I could spell train line in, so my typing's not that good tonight. The other side. Well, we have one side, we can build the other side. We know what side, how long the other side is. This side has to be the same length or width or whichever dimension you want to assign it to. And these are long, left long to glue them to the sides of the car. So it has to get mounted somehow. And there it is. We add the sides to the flat car body. This is pretty easy to do. A little bit of glue on each one of these legs. couple of clamps. You can never have too many clamps. That axiom is absolutely true. Whenever I'm out and I see cheap clamps, I just buy them, whether I need them or not. Someday I will need them. Someday comes far more frequently than I think it does. I've added on an extra piece of 3x4 at each end. That is so I'll have something to anchor the ends of the car body to. Here's the other side. Same story, just a little bit of glue, some clamps, tack it in place. It sits down on top of the car deck and along the sides with a nice right angle. A couple of clamps, spring clamps, and it goes together pretty quickly. Okay, so we need something at the ends. The one end has a door, so we need this is not the door. These are the two pieces that go on each side of the door, and again, some 3x4 stock. I use a lot of 3x4 because, quite frankly, I have 200 or 300 pieces of it laying around. I bought a couple of bundles in bulk from Kapler years ago, and I probably have my lifetime and the next three person's lifetimes of 3x4 laying about. Also, because 3x4 stock does happen to fit perfectly inside a Grant Line stake holders. So it's a very convenient size to use. So these are just glued together on the edge, and these pieces are added on top with some bunch of clamps and some carpenter's glue, and then we have those two pieces that go on outside of the door. Okay, so we add those two pieces, those two ends on, and they tack right into these added 3x4s on the sides. This piece runs across all the way on the inside. Never going to see it except in this slide. Well, maybe another slide, I don't know. That's, my computer is like my subconscious. It has a mind of its own. The extra board at the bottom is for stability and alignment, to get these end pieces in alignment, but it's also for when I build the door, for the door to actually have something to rest on when I glue it in place. Just a little thinking in advance, just a shade. Don't want to overdo that though. And we look for the other end, and yes, there's no back wall. So we need a back wall. So we build a back wall. And there's that missing back wall. This does not extend below the car body. It sits right on top. You see this runs a little bit short. It sits right on top of the car body. And here's our door. I don't remember what size this is. It's probably 2 by something, or yeah, it's probably 2 by something in strip wood. So I just make it up as I go, of course. So, and I think that's where we're going to stop tonight. And I'm right. I like it when I'm right some days. So we'll pick this up in not next week, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't know which. It depends what's on the schedule.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. That's
2 weeks.
Night before Thanksgiving.
Hey, Martin.
You're gonna have to come back before you're cooking the turkey to see how this ends.
Martin, I have a couple of questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Those resin cast bolsters, where'd you
Yes,
get
sir.
them? You make them, or did you get them
Yeah.
from?
Yeah, I make them.
Oh, you make them. Okay.
Yeah. How many you want? I sell them $1 a pair.
Well, maybe.
I'm serious. When I'm at the Strasbourg train show, I have them in bags for $1 a pair.
All
But
right.
you have to drill them and tap them for whatever it is you want.
The other question is, what was the type of wood you used in the siding? That looked like a walnut or something, or mahogany.
No, that's the standard coffee stir that's been stained in Minwax.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting. Do you remember the stain color?
No, I have no idea what it is, because I may have mentioned this in passing in the past. I have a bottle of Minwax stain which is comprised of leftovers from other cans. As the bottle goes down, I just open a can randomly and top off the bottle.
Okay.
And or as the can almost gets empty. It's a pint can. If the can's almost empty, I just dump it in the bottle. So that bottle of Minwax stain for model trains is always changing. It's never a constant. So it shifts around from walnut to pine to oak. I think I threw some cherry into it a couple of weeks ago. So it moves around. It just moves around. It's fun. And those coffee stirrers, they're not uniform by any stretch in the dimension or being straight or not. They're most of the time they're fairly crooked. You have to kind of fiddle with them to get them to come out even. But they're like birch, I think, and they take stain in consistently too. So it has, they're not really smooth and polished. So they actually add a nice dimension to the texture to whenever you use them.
Yep.
And they're super cheap.
Yeah, $20 for 10,000. give or take $10.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm serious. I think that's what I paid
Thanks
for.
so much,
I bought
Martin.
10,000. Very economical materials.
I know. That's why they're super cheap. I mean, it's great. It's great construction material. Martin, thank you so very much. Well, now let's turn to Tom Farrell. Tom has got a little different subject for us this evening. I hope you enjoy it. Tom, welcome.
Thank you again for having me. Yes, tonight's going to be a little different. I'm going to talk about O scale and about ON30 and the origins of some of these scales and a little history of things. And, we jokingly refer to ourselves as the black sheep of model railroading that comes from the gauge that ON30 is. And I'll explain some of the origins of that. And anyway, we're going to dive right into this. So everybody's probably familiar with this. It's almost a cliche to see this graphic now. You've got G scale, O scale, S scale, HO, so forth and so on. This is the ratio, and this is the width between the rails. We're all familiar with these. Tonight, I'm going to go into the history of O scale very briefly, and then talk about narrow gauge, and then a pioneer of or why ON30 is so popular today. I think you'll find it interesting, and the product's offerings. So O scale is actually 125 years old. It was introduced by Märklin. That's the correct pronunciation. I speak German. Märklin also invented HO gauge, and they invented N gauge as well as O gauge. I didn't know that till I did my research here. Lionel adopted O gauge in 1906. And I think everybody's familiar with Lionel. This is the early beginnings of commercial model trains across the world, but we're going to talk about the US. What's referred to as the golden age of model railroading, as far as O scale is concerned, is the pre-war stuff, 1920s, 1940s. It was the biggest scale, primarily led by Lionel. And towards the closer we got to World War II, there was a shift from the tin plate to cast and stamped trains that were more realistic than the printed tin plate. Apparently, Lionel still made trains during World War II, but obviously slowed down their production. It became the dominant scale, though, by the end of the 1940s. Post-war in the 50s and 60s, it was still popular, but HO was introduced. And I think everybody knows HO is the largest scale today. But O scale still retained its fans because it's considered the modeler's scale, because it's much easier to get detail the larger you go. I transitioned from that period from basically toy trains to Lionel and some others, American Flyer, kept adding more detail and brought them up to from toy trains to hobby grade models. So they started to shift their marketing emphasis by the late 1960s to hobbyists. And then what's considered the Renaissance period is a renewed interest in O gauge as a collector's item. People began collecting these die-cast Lionel trains, and then around 1998, Bachmann introduced ON30 trains, which were basically O scale trains, narrow gauge, that ran on HO track. And they also had a dedicated following amongst scratch builders and kit bashers and people that appreciate detail and freewheeling modeling. Then I consider the modern era in model railroading, when things started to get very interesting with electronics and things. And Lionel caters almost exclusively to high-end collectors. I mean, look at that locomotive. For anybody that might think Lionel makes toys, that's a $2,600 toy that does everything to, in fact, it actually does talk to you. I mean, it's an amazing piece of technology and modeling. Modern O-scale, basically standard gauge, we refer to 3-rail or high rail on new tracks, and then there's O-scale 2-rail. Now, here's an interesting thing. When Merkelin brought this stuff over, it wasn't quite O-scale, it was approximate. And this carried through over 100 years because there's actually 1.25 inches between the rails, which is actually 5 feet between the rails. And as anybody knows, the prototype is actually 4 feet, 8½ inches. So I find it amusing that people sometimes in standard O gauge refer to ON30 with no basis in prototypes, which it actually does, when in fact for over 120 years, they're out of scale. And that's the reason for Proto 48, which is also referred to as fine scale. It actually measures out to 4 feet, 8½ Anyway, that is the standard gauge and the history of standard gauge and how we come to our 1.25 track for O scale today, and why these guys, the Proto 48s guys, have their own little diatribe to bring that back to scale. Now, common narrow gauge O scales divided into principally ON3, ON30, and O18. There are other gauges, narrow gauges in there, but these are the most popular. What's interesting is ON30 refers to 30 inches or 2 feet, 1½ between the rails. And this is because it's the whole idea of ON30 was to be based on HO scale track, which scales out to be 30 inches in O scale. ON3 is 0.75 inches between the rails, and it's 36 inches between the rails. That's the gauge. Technically, in the beginning of ON30, they called it ON2½ as a nod to ON3. So that what's happening here is you're mixing inches with feet as far as naming these gauges. You could say that ON30, 30 inches. You could say that ON3 is really ON36. And then finally, you've got ON18, which is 18 inches between the gauge, or between the track. And that uses N gauge track, which is 9 millimeters, which scales out to 1 foot 6 inches. So basically, the confusion is when they introduced ON 30, they had a choice to call it ON 2 1/2, which would be a 2 1/2 feet, which would be a nod to the ON 3, which is 3 foot. And then they could have called ON 18, ON 1 1/2. One thing that's going on here is ON 30 and ON 18 are the popular gauges, and ON 3 is basically dying. These are people that like to model in O scale, narrow gauge, turn to ON 30 because, as you'll see, the dearth of relatively inexpensive locomotives. You don't have to buy brass locomotives like the ON 3, and it just opened up the hobby to many modelers that would like to run narrow gauge but couldn't, quite frankly, afford ON 3. And just a nod to Steve Sherrill, ON 18 is basically becoming very popular. Anyway, so where to come from? Back in the 50s, I did a little research here. People actually did use HO gauge wheels and locomotive chassis and HO gauge track. Nobody really does this anymore. You do use, a lot of people that kit bash will use an HO locomotive chassis, but nobody's really taking HO gauge wheel sets, putting them on locomotives. There's plenty of ON 30 wheel sets for freight cars, kit bashing, and scratch building. This guy, Gordon North, he did an article back in a couple of these guys, Bill Livingston and Gordon North. I don't know if any of you guys know these guys. I was going to look up the magazine article because I do have these things, but I didn't have time. Bachmann in 1998 is the one that really got ON 30 going. They came out with a Mogul, a 260 steam locomotive for their Christmas Village market. And it sold incredible numbers. And at one time, ON 30 was considered the fastest growing segment of model railroading in the US. And it even got other manufacturers to offer some locomotives. The guy that led the party here for ON 30 passed away in 2016, this fella, Lee Riley. And a couple of you guys actually know this guy. Now, I'm not going to read his resume here, but this guy was like the who's who of model railroading. He was quite a guy. And if I can find more research on him, I'll do a legacy program like I did for Al Judy. But he was a real pioneer. And he drove ON 30 within Bachmann. He was the product champion which is the largest model railroad company in the world. I didn't realize Bachmann was. I thought Merklin or Lionel might be, but Bachmann is actually the largest. And this guy was a dynamo, just a real dynamo. Another guy that pushed ON 30 was Al Judy. And I don't need to go into this because just recently I did his legacy program. But Al was probably took, if you will, the reins to push this ON 30 onward. And we're going to maintain that legacy, as everyone knows. But with Al's shows and things and all his many articles and his ON 30 railroading Facebook page that I run, we're pushing the ON 30 on into the future here. What's neat about ON 30, for those of you that may or may not know, is it fits conveniently in between HO scale and standard O scale. So it gives you basically all the advantages of HO. Your layout is, in essence, the same radius or less as HO scale model railroading, but significantly less space required for standard O scale. Yet when you build your buildings and you're doing your modeling, it's not an exercise in fine optics. It's considered a builder scale. I want everybody to know that some of the finest modelers in the hobby today are the ON30 crew. Just this evening, we saw that two of the presentations were ON30 guys, and at the recent Pittsburgh National Convention in Model Railroading, I'm thinking more than half of the contest winners were ON30. So it's really the modeler scale. And it's just easier to work in O scale than the other scales. Now, just to clear up, yes, you can run on HO track. There it is up there. It's the same gauge. Gauge means the width of the rails, between the rails, the outside of the rails. But you see the tie spacing is rather close in HO for our O scale needs. These are the two commercial manufacturers of track, Pico, ON30, and Micro Engineering. There's the ongoing debate. Micro Engineering's a better looking track. The Pico track's more durable. I've used both. I personally like the Pico. It's indestructible. It's very durable. But that shows you some people do use HO track. Al Judy's layout used HO track, and nobody ever threw disparaging remarks against his modeling, although on his rebuild of his layout before he passed, he was replacing this HO track with the Pico track, citing the durability of this track. It's just very well made. Here's an HO tank car, just to put things in perspective. It's a little over 6 inches in length. Here's an ON30 tank car. It's approximately 7 inches in length. Now, these are all, tank cars can be various lengths, but I just want to put things in perspective. And I want to point out the difference between ON3 and ON30. This is a brass, highly detailed ON3 car that I have that I've put ON30 trucks on, but it doesn't really work too well in ON30. It's 9 inches in length. It's big. This is why we need to talk about proportions. So even though our ON30 runs on HO track, it's not HO scale. It's runs on HO gauge track, but has nothing in common with the scale. It's still twice as big scale-wise, proportionately, than HO. And ON30, even though it's O scale, these cars are bigger. I also have a box car in ON3, and it's approximately the length of this tank car. They don't look right together, the ON3 and the ON30 running side by side. The ON3 is simply proportion larger. And this particular tank car is rather crude. There are a lot of scale ON30 freight cars and passenger cars. There it gives you an idea of we're talking proportions. So there's the end shot of an HO tank car, an ON30 tank car, and then the ON3 tank car. Disregarding the chassis they're sitting on, look at the actual fabrications, the tanks. See the diameters? That gives you a good idea. I've found that you can't run ON3 with ON30. It just doesn't seem to look right. It's a proportion issue. ON30 gauge steam locomotives. Now we can thank Lee Riley for all these locomotives that are available to us from Bachmann and a couple others. This Mogul, they produce Bachmann. I don't know what the production numbers are. Maybe somebody knows them out there in our audience, but they produced this mogul by the thousands. Now, it's a relatively low detail locomotive, but the mechanism is indestructible. I had this on my old layout. I must have had, I don't know if I had a dozen of them, but I had at least 10 DC versions of this mogul. They just ran and ran and ran. And on my new Rustic Buff and Old Gothic, I have 2 new moguls from Bachmann that are digital command control with sound. And they upgraded the mechanism to put in metal gears. So now the thing is really indestructible. And if you want a kit bash, this offers an excellent chassis. And you can detail this. You can throw off all this plastic injection molded lights and things, and you can add your own. I mean, you can do a lot with this and make it a very presentable model. This is the first and early ON30 from Bachmann, and it was meant for basically to run around Christmas trees. So it had adequate but not great detail. The subsequent models that Lee pushed through the very large Bachmann company are basically magnificent. They're die cast, they're gorgeous models. I'll show you about a half a dozen of them. I don't know the full count. It's not a great photograph, but heads and shoulders over the mogul in detail here. Here's a Bachmann 240. He had a large variety of what you might consider, compared to standard gauge, oddball locomotives. And some of them had more detail than others, but there's a huge variety, and they produce so many of these out there. You can find them on eBay, or you can find them new at shows. There's just tens of thousands of these out there. Another one that's very clean, very nice, a 2442, really oddball locomotive. Another one from the 1890s, inside frame American wood cab. Again, these can be weathered, and that doesn't have bad detail, but none of these are weathered. These are just stock photos off the internet. This is a 460. This is die cast, by the way. And they made little porters too. They also have a little diesel at the same similar size, 042. Lee, it was the reason this became such a popular scale for model railroaders. There's a 2-truck Stearns Hessler. We just call it a Hessler. And a 2-truck Climax. Now remember, these things are, a brass locomotive would cost you at least $600 on the used market. New, these were a couple $100. You can find them on the eBay for that in DCC. Other manufacturers produced models for ON30 models for the U.S. market. Mountain Model Imports, MMI, I guess they're no longer in business, or they quit making these. But this is a museum piece. It's also priced like one. It's expensive, but it's ON30, and it's also available in ON3. This quality locomotive was all that was available in ON3. You had to buy these brass locomotives or these metal works of art. They were a couple thousand or $1,500. It negated the scale being practiced on a wide basis. Broadway Limited, they came out with this C16 280. I have 5 of these. 2 of them don't work. I get mixed. Some people love this locomotive. Some people, Al Judy, thought it was not exactly of the highest quality. It came equipped with only as digital DCC with sound. They can be super detailed. The one thing I don't like about these and why two of mine are dead is they have a plastic gear. And I'm not aware of anybody that makes a replacement metal gear. The price of these have gone up significantly on eBay. I can't believe the pricing they're getting for these. It's not even in the same league as what's above here. And there's some other people that make San Juan Car Company. They make kits and ready to run. I caught a European here, wagons, freight cars. How'd that get in there? And then AccuCraft, I guess they make some brass engines, but I'm not sure they still do. I want people to start thinking of ON30 as the modeler scale, because as we saw tonight with Matt and Martin and some others that model in ON30, you can do a lot with O scale and the narrow gauge. ON30 gives you the footprint of an HO layout. So people often say, well, S scale is nice because it's large and it's, approximately the same size as ON30, but we have a lot more advantages. Our locomotives are, if you're into steam, we have a much wider variety. And we have the ability to use HO track if you want. There's a scale for everybody's need. I started out with N scale in 1967. It only came over here in the US in 65. I modeled N scale to 2005. There's no one scale that's better than the other. Every scale has its advantages. The only thing I'm saying about ON30 is it does give you the ability to model in the same space as HO with the ability to scratch build or build things in O scale, which is easier. The bigger it gets, the easier it is. This is my latest layout and my latest scene I'm working on. It's another scene from my latest railroad, my John Allen engine house. And there's a heavily kit bashed Broadway limited C16. So this is what I'm talking about. You can do with these models. When I purchased this Broadway limited C16, it was only like $150. And I put this wheelback tender on it and added all this stuff, a bell and some other stuff. And you can super detail them quite easily and quite inexpensively. Again, the modeler scale. Because you're an O scale, things are just easier, in my opinion. This is Al Judy. The detail you can achieve with ON30. It's O scale. Al Judy again, this is a kit. Nice scene. I took the photograph. Len Eberwein, one of the finest model railroaders that you scratch builders that you've never heard of. I have this now. He gave it to me. This is a turn of the century oil distillery. A magnificent detail that you can achieve in O scale. Len was an ON30 modeler. That's hand carved balsa foam, scratch built doors out of styrene. Everything there is scratch built. Another Len Eberwein, Coal Depot. Randy Peprock, downtown Deco, has these cast plaster buildings. Again, because it's O scale, you can have a lot of detail. There's an ON30 Bachmann Shea by this fella, Stan Shields. Try and get him on the show. This is a work in progress. I pulled it off the ON30 railroading page this evening. Impossible to do in N scale. Not impossible in HO or S, but far easier than in O scale. And then if you want to go off and to do completely your own thing, a lot of you people know Gary Beatty, the Porto Baracho Railroad. He and I recently exchanged structures. This is just fantastic, whimsical modeling. So with ON30, since we're not, quote, rivet counters, and you have a license to do basically what you want, that's world-class modeling there. Just absolutely world-class. So as I say, we call ourselves the black sheep because there aren't a lot of prototypes that are actually 30 inches, but that doesn't bother us. This was an alternative to ON3, which were brass locomotives with finicky mechanisms that didn't run well and were quite expensive. And ON30 became the fastest growing segment model railroading because of the relatively inexpensive locomotives that were basically bulletproof. They had issues with some of them early on, but they fixed them. Anyway, a little overview of ON30, difference between scale and gauge, and where all these things came from.
Hey, Tom, this is Bob Geldmacher. I actually got back into model railroading and ON30 by buying one of those Christmas kits that Department 56 put out with Bachmann.
Yes.
And I stopped buying Department 56 and went whole hog down the ON30 route. And unfortunately, in the last, 5 years, Bachmann has really cut back on the number of engines that they're coming out with.
Yes.
With the Bachmann at a show not too long ago. And he said that the company is really being run by folks that are more concerned about the numbers than they are about the modeling. And that's the reason why you're not seeing so many new engines coming out the way they did back in the 2004, 2010 range. And that's a shame because they do put out nice stuff.
Yeah.
At the recent Pittsburgh narrow gauge convention, we had an opportunity to speak to a Bachmann officer, and I cornered him on that very subject. I suggested that to take the risk off the table to introduce a new or reissue locomotive, they could take deposits, and when they had a sufficient number of deposits, even if it took 2 years, we'd take the risk right off the table. Then they could build their production run, which is what we would call their economic order quantity. And he looked at me like I was speaking German. Then I called him and I said, I don't know if you guys were there. I said, well, what you really need is a CEO with little imagination. I said, maybe I should run your damn company.
Well, I think there are really two problems that Bachmann faces that we all need to understand. I mean, the first is that to a great extent they poison the channel. So they would build n number of units, 1,000, 2,000, how many ever, 3,000 units they built. What happened was a lot of the hobby shops bought them. And those of you who've been to hobby shops, how long did you go to a hobby shop and see the same ON30 engine in the case with a list price sticker on it and nobody bought it? So what happened was the hobby shops bought a couple of ON30 engines when they first came out, and it was all exciting, but they didn't sell because the ON30 modelers, as Tom indicated, came primarily getting an ON30 because it was a relatively low cost version of O scale narrow gauge. Then basically when they had their inventory sold to the hobby shops, they sold it to the internet vendors, and they would mark it down 30 or 40%. Well, if you're a hobby shop and you get 40% off list or 45% off list, now those other hobby shops are selling it for just a little bit more than you paid for it. And then finally, the final inventory got blown out on Train World. I don't know how many of you bought on Train World ON30 engines. I bought 440s, the outside frame 440s, for $60 with DCC. And, at that point, basically the value of what was in the hobby shops had come to zero. So what we've seen is the hobby shops won't carry ON30 anymore. So you can't front end load with ON30 in the hobby shops. I think the other thing is that the cost structure has gone up dramatically in China. If you look at the cost to produce things in China, I think it's gone up significantly in the last 3 or 4 years. So the ability to create lots of engines there, I think, is going to be much more expensive. And by the way, that kind of is a comment that if you want to buy something, you should buy it now, because if we end up with large tariffs, that will increase the cost of anything coming from China. So, I think it's kind of the industry is where it is because of those past models of basically selling things to the hobby shops and then having them be stuck with it and then blowing them out on the internet.
But I would argue this, Bill. When you're selling trains today, the model is not hobby shops. Bachmann could go direct to market, direct to their customers, like Lionel mostly does. Or Arnold in Canada is a perfect example of an extremely run company. He takes deposits, he throws out a model that a proposition that he'll make, whatever. If Bachmann said, we want to make a medium weight Shay of some kind, and they started taking deposits and they said the approximate final price is going to be this, and it's going to be 3 years from now. Even if it took them 2 years to get these deposits and they put them in escrow, you're not worried about hobby shops. You're worried about direct to market, direct customers. And even if you did a low production run, it's all cost plus. So long as you tell your customer what the final price is, it's irrelevant, unless of course there's no market. If there's no market for a $600 Shay or $500 Shay, then it all falls apart. But if somebody wants a $500 or $600 Shay, and Bachmann says, okay, give me a $200 deposit, see if you're serious, then when they get a sufficient number, they go to the supplier, say, hey, here, we need a production run at 200, 500, or whatever it is. We estimate there's 30 to 40,000 ON30 modelers. I don't know if that's true or not, but there might be 500 of them that might shell out, $400 or $500 for a Shay, I would think. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think, Tom, one of the
Listen,
problems.
guys, I hate this is interesting. Guys, I think this is interesting, but it's 9 o'clock already. And
you guys are
Phil,
talking
I'm
out of
afraid
your
we're not
hat
going to be
on
able to do the
ON30.
Caboose.
You're talking out of your hat on ON30. I'm sorry.
And what
Why'd you
exactly?
say that?
Well, I happen to know Lee quite well. I did. And Lee, the ON30 market was really brought because they had HO track, and they brought it as you mentioned a little bit to the Christmas thing, and then it progressed and it caught on. But the market really was HO guys couldn't see, and they dumped their HO stuff and moved to ON30. And that was one of the big pushes. It wasn't because they wanted to be into fine scale modeling, I can tell you that. It was these older guys who couldn't see. And, to say that only ON30 is a modeler scale, well, that's a lot of bullshit too. I think O scale is a fantastic scale, but I think the other scales modeling wise, just as good. And to say that's the only scale, I think you could
say it was the only scale. And I think
pardon me. I'm afraid we're just going to have to shut this down tonight. And I'm sorry, Steve, we won't be able to get to your segment. The show just ran over. And Phil, I'm sorry we won't be able to get to the Pittsburgh show segment tonight. But we will be able to have those in future shows. So thank you so much for everybody being here tonight. We really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the show. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. And I really do appreciate everybody being here. And I understand that sometimes our subjects, can get kind of heated and so forth, but would appreciate if everybody could watch their language a little bit. I really do appreciate that. So thanks again for being here tonight, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Pat, thank you so much for the show tonight, and everybody, thank you so much for being here. Really